Hey, hey. Yeah, great.
We're trying something out of the blue, which is moving to Friday today. Usually here on Thursdays. So don't get confused. We will be here next week on Thursday at 6 p.m. and we will have a panel with the curators of this show, as well as our own Adam Ryan here at CPW, who played a big part in bringing this show to these walls. So please join us next week if you're curious and want to hear more about the Kathleen and Colleen Kenyon show. Otherwise, I want to welcome Bucky Miller today, who's coming to us from Knoxville. And we're lucky that he's joining us tonight. He has a show opening in Woodstock at the Mothership, right, in Woodstock. So if you're around on Sunday between 6 and 8, please check that out. Bucky Miller, to those who don't already know, is an artist and writer who works in the gray area between extreme presence and imaginative escape. He is a recipient of the Aaron Siskin Foundation Individual Photographers Fellowship, has had a solo exhibitions at spaces including the Contemporary Arts Museum Houston, and has shown at numerous galleries internationally. His first self-published book, The Picture of the Afghan Hound, was selected as one of Photo Eye's best photo books of 2016. Miller's work has been featured in publications like N+1, Der Grief, and The Believer. He has an MFA in studio art from the University of Texas at Austin, a BFA in art photography from Arizona State University, and also studied at the Royal College of Art program in sculpture. He has participated in the Stoveworks residency, Recycled Artist in Residency, Mushroom Camp for Socially Awkward Storytellers, I want to hear more about that, please. Bucky is a frequent contributor of photo essays to the Texas arts publication Glass Tire and one-third of the Brooklyn-based pop-up gallery Raymore and Flanagan. He moves between Texas, Arizona, New York, and Tennessee, where he's teaching assistant professor for the University of Tennessee School of Art. Thank you for joining us, and can we give him a warm welcome?
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight on the Friday, Thursday. That's very nice of y'all. Thanks to the CPW staff for having me. It's a real delight to be here. Thanks to Sam for kind of pointing them in my direction. And it's cool to see like this weird, like small collection of people that I know from really different parts of my life all here tonight. Like that's a bizarre, fun surprise. I just had to do this lecture for an academic job interview last week, and it was very, very rigid and intense. So I'm going to try and give a little bit of a looser version of it tonight and kind of see how that goes, kind of adapt it for this space and this audience. My name is Bucky Miller. I am a photographer. I'm also a sculptor, a performance artist, a bit, a writer. Pretty much everything I do, though, eventually comes around to photography in one way or another. It's like a horseshoe. I always find my way back there. I am currently based in, let's see here, Knoxville, Tennessee. It's relatively new for me, but that's where both of these pictures were made. I think that these two were successful in part because they remain at least partially geographically ambiguous. Pretty much wherever I go in this country, it seems that the landscape is caught in some uncomfortable bardo. And when I say landscape, I might mean much more than the mountains and the trees, the roads on which we drive or walk, the buildings where we buy cake. In her book, Ordinary Affects, the anthropologist Kathleen Stewart said that everyday life is a life lived on the level of surging affects, impact suffered or barely avoided. It takes everything we have, but it also spawns a series of little somethings dreamed up in the course of things. She wrote that in 2007, and I feel like it's just grows increasingly apt. Like it feels like it was written yesterday. It's really kind of amazing to me. But with that in mind, I find my way to these photographs. It occurred to me while I was applying for the job that this language of the dueling forces of heightened presence and imaginative escape was a really nice way to kind of frame what I do. I feel like I'm pulled along by these two kind of contradictory forces. I sometimes, with that in mind, can't help but think of myself as like the castaway in an old cartoon who imagines his shipmate on the beach as a giant walking hamburger. So this photograph depicts two different forms of eye contact. The picture is called Lucy because the dog in the picture is named Lucy, and I don't know the name of the animal on the television. It's a relatively recent picture, and I'm going to hinge this talk on it for a while. I think that I learn a lot about who I am as an artist by studying my own pictures. And as soon as I saw this photograph this past summer, it felt like a key to understanding what it was that I was up to as an artist these days. It's taken me some time to figure out exactly why that is, and I'm still kind of working through why that might be. But I want to kind of present some of those reasons for you now. First, obviously, the picture depicts non-human animals, and animals are a really constant presence in my work. This is the oldest photograph that I'm going to show you tonight. It's about 10 years old, and I really can't think of any better reason for the invention of photography than like the ability to put a Cheshire cat on something. Like it's unbelievable to me, but I think meditating on animals can really help us reorient our human-centric perspective on things. Animals are also nonverbal, just like photographs and like the urge to make photographs, but I'll say more about that later. Some of the animals that I photograph are known to me. This often means pets, like Lucy here, or like Max. Here sits Max, a compact thing on the precipice of the unknown, or at least on a table in a basement. In hindsight, it seems to me that I've made many of my favorite pictures while pet sitting. So while I don't live in this area, if anyone ever needs a pet sitter, I have time. Other animals that appear in my work are unknown to me. The baboon is one example. You know, he's separated from me by multiple lenses. It's not just the one, but there's a second one that's also providing me with like a relative amount of safety. But this can manifest in a lot of different ways. Like this heron is another example of an unknown animal. Perched within the parallels here, it's a passing encounter, rather simple, but you know, still something that I found worth meditating on. This toad is another example of an unknown animal. I did not know this toad, though it felt that I did. The toad lived on my porch when I was in graduate school. It would die and then reappear. Sometimes the toad would present itself as 3 toads at once. Yet I still only ever thought of it as the toad, this one toad. I should say here that I have a very non-hierarchical, picture-focused approach to photography. I use a really wide variety of good and bad cameras in my work. This toad was actually photographed on an instant camera, like a Polaroid, but the Fuji Instax. And I was much, much too close to it to focus. Still, though, when I scanned that print and printed it large on this adhesive fabric, it went a long way, I thought, to communicating how difficult it was to know the toad that I saw every day. This beaver is also an unknown animal. There's always some reason for me to remain hopeful in my day-to-day, and it is often the presence of an oversized animal or giant peanut on the side of the road. The horse puppet, meanwhile, that is me. And you can tell because the horse is wearing my coat, because like me, he is gesturing with delight at the beaver. And because if you look closely at the print, you will see the word self is written right beneath my hand there. Now, I actually didn't know that was there when I made this picture. It's very difficult to make a self-portrait in the snow. But, you know, like Lee Friedlander said, photography is a generous medium. And this was a little bonus gift for me in this picture. So there's an element of theatricality in my pictures. The classic dichotomy of comedy and tragedy is present there. And I'm not exactly sure which photograph to use to represent this. So I'll just show you this picture of a very old dog being shown something much older. I want humor to act as a tool of gentle rebellion, a revealer of possibilities, and a denier of cynicism in my photographs. A nice way to access this is through confusing levels of intervention, you know, like presenting some sort of questionable authorship in the pictures. This picture suggests some staging, you know, the television, I might have set that up. But one thing about photographing living non-humans is that they are incredibly difficult to pose. I like to blend the line between what is staged and what is unstaged in pictures. So like, take, for instance, this very figurative bar of chocolate that I found in the woods in the Berkshires, kind of a mythic presence that is then complicated by the presence of this picture elsewhere. I'm interested broadly in the discourse between pictures. You know, this picture has 2 photographs within it almost. It's like there's 2 frames and each one of them contains an animal, and those animals are kind of vibrating off of each other. But I'm after a kind of complex cohesion like this. I'm after situations where the reader is encouraged to move to and fro between photographs. Like the tension in this arrangement, for example, I feel like a lot of the ideas that I've discussed so far are brought into sort of disjunctive harmony here. I think the dog even kind of references Max on the precipice of the unknown from a couple slides ago. The 2 unrelated forms, though, that converse through photography, through a dense tangle of reference. I orchestrated only one of these situations, but they kind of begin to echo each other in surprising ways for me. Meanwhile, if you take that onion and instead pair it with this monkey, it's an entirely different situation. It's like a more direct humor, a Promethean evolution of form. So yeah, Lucy also points to how parallel realities can exist within the work at once. Photographs don't have to depict one place somehow. Like this birdhouse, for example, really starts to feel like it is somewhere else. And another way that parallel realities present themselves in my work is through the presence of Garlic Boy. Garlic Boy is a companion of mine who shows up in my work on occasion, and he's never really the central subject, but we travel together. Here he is outside Chattanooga, Tennessee, with little Debbie. My work is not about Garlic Boy at all. I like to think of him in the same light as how Stephen Shore sometimes put his wife Ginger in photographs. She served as like this punctuation that kind of changed the context of the photographs that you were seeing without really veering him off the course of his job of documenting the American roadside landscape. Garlic Boy has an Instagram, though he's bad at it. And these are Garlic Boy's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Boy. So pictures aren't one thing. They carry a plethora of aboutness, and that aboutness a lot of times depends on their context. Not just what pictures they're nestled between, but how they are seen and where they are seen. Like, I consider this lecture a valid context for presenting these photographs. The lecture is actually one of my favorite ways to present my work because projected photographs remind me a lot of cinema, which is an art form that brings me a lot of inspiration and a lot of joy. What you see projected here at any time is not a record of something else. It is precisely what I want you to see at the moment that you are seeing it. So here's a different scale of the print. So not only is the exhibition, or not only is the lecture a great way to present the work, but exhibitions are as well. This is a 28 by 42 inch pigment print of Lucy that's currently at the Phoenix Art Museum being framed for an exhibition that's going to open later this year, a group show called Funny Business, Humor and Photography. And I'm kind of like blown away by the context that this is going to put this picture into. Like some of the other artists in the show are like Gary Winogrand, Helen Levitt, Claire Strand, Seung-Kwan Chi, Tommy Ka, William Wegman, Jeff Mermelstein, like this really amazing list of artists that I'm like, my jaw is on the floor that Lucy gets to be there. It feels really exciting for me. But just to stay with the exhibitions for a moment and to stay with dogs for a moment, I want to go back in time a bit and show you this picture, which is documentation of an installation, very fragmentary documentation of an installation called Dog Show, which was a 2-person show I had in Austin. And the centerpiece was this large, oversized photograph, the picture of the Afghan hound, which I had cropped from a 1945 AKC info card and then repeated in a smaller version along the rafters of the space. I had found out that the first ever cloned dog was an Afghan hound named Snuppy. And I marveled at the time at the idea of this organic thing being the result of science in that way. So this was kind of my homage. And the nice thing about, photographs being able to duplicate themselves is that it then jumped very cleanly into this bathroom at another exhibition. This was also in Austin. This and the next few photographs come from a solo exhibition that I had called Grackle Actions. It was at a museum and sculpture garden in Austin. And the show posed some interesting challenges because it asked me to install work both in a gallery and then out in a sculpture garden. As a photographer, I was like, how am I going to do that? And I jumped very quickly to furniture. So in order to get things kind of on the same level, the work in the gallery, some of the pieces were installed coming out of the floor on these table legs so that the photographs could sit horizontally in the space and be like little tables. There just happened to be perfect holes in the floor that a table leg could just bolt into. So this is the bread. I love bread. I photograph it a lot. For me, bread feels like a foil to the animals in my photographs in certain ways. Bread is a very, very human thing, but I feel like bread represents humanity at its best. And then so here is the bread in the sculpture garden's tool shed. We were able to install this so that the grounds crew at the sculpture garden could still get to their tools. It wouldn't disrupt them at all. And last I heard, it was still there. This piece was also in the show. It's called Boundary Goose. It was at the very edge of the garden where the trails of the sculpture garden transitioned into municipal hiking trails. It resembled a trailhead marker, but when you got up to it, all you saw was this incredibly out of focus goose. I'm interested in photography's ability to withhold information as much as it can provide it. And I felt like a sort of threatening, aggressive, unclear goose was a good messenger for that idea. So shifting context a bit here, this is an exhibition that I had in Ithaca, New York at Neighbors Gallery. It was called Cookie Town, and it was a comparatively traditional installation to the one at the sculpture garden. The most unorthodox parts were these framed prints that were hanging from the ceiling by 2x4s. The floating pylons were double-sided, and I just clamped them to the rafters with quick grips. I like the sense that things could come apart as quickly as they go together, that something that's held up might not stay up. So I tend to use clamps a lot, both in installations and in the photographs themselves. I actually just 3D printed some clamps, but I don't have any documentation of that. So it's like this new thing that I'm working on. I was just showing Sam. Anyway, Cookie Town is the name of a real town in rural Oklahoma, which I found by typing cookie into the iPhone weather app. And I hadn't visited Cookie Town yet when I put together this show. I looked at it on Google Maps, and it revealed that Cookie Town was little more than some fields and a church. Since I couldn't see it for myself, I decided to create my own mental Cookie Town in its place. It would be a place that was propelled entirely by conjecture. So let's look at some of the images. First, at the end of this front pylon, the wood transitions into the wire and terminates in this cosmic garlic. This one is called Taper-Shaped Hole. You see the clamp there in the frame holding up the piece. This is named after the South American mammal with a prehensile snout. I was living in Houston at the time that I made this photograph, and I had just been to the zoo and seen a tapir. At the Houston Zoo, the elephant enclosure is sponsored by Chevron, and I just was thinking about the animals a lot after I left. 3 of the 4 species of tapirs on Earth are endangered. This one was also made out of my apartment window. It's called black-bellied whistling duck because that's the duck that's the only duck you're really going to see on a roof in Texas. And the sky here is my ceiling. These were installed this way in the show. I think of these as kind of the manic citizens of Cookie Town. It only recently occurred to me that those potatoes are positioned as if they are indeed riding in a sports utility vehicle. And then this is a picture of a shed going for a hike at sunset. The sunset is a really beautiful cliche. I love sunsets. I think that there's a lot of value as a photographer in working with cliches, because cliches are accessible and they can open up new audiences to small surprises that exist photographically, like a hiking shed. The sunset is a door into this world for me. After Cookie Town, I was able to reinstall that same work in a DIY sort of pop-up space in a kitchen in Manhattan. This was a 2-person show where I had work in the kitchen and a friend of mine had work in one of the bedrooms. And I took some of the work out of the frame, so they were just these mounted flat planes that could have a smaller profile, but they became like building blocks. I was able to kind of like balance them on each other, and you'll see they're like sticking out of drawers and balanced off of the cabinet doors in the kitchen. And then again, just like cheap clamps, spring clamps, and shoelaces and wooden shims held everything in place. The last exhibition that I want to show you pictures from tonight is the one that hasn't happened yet. It's the one that's happening on Sunday in Woodstock. So if you're around, please come out. It's called Big Skeleton, and it's at the Mothership Gallery. So this is a group of photographs that I made depicting various sculptural configurations of the 12-foot Home Depot skeleton that has kind of like spread across the country in the past 5 years or so. I made these mostly while at an artist residency in Chattanooga, Tennessee, at a place called Stoveworks. I'm really fascinated by Halloween decorations in general, and specifically in the Halloween skeletons. Skeletons possess this really deep theatricality. You know, you see them posing in people's front yards in all of these different ways, and their lack of skin means that they're always smiling. And I really like to think about the factories, most likely in other countries that are spending vast resources pumping out these plastic human remains for the American holiday market to just hit one day of the year. Here's a documentation of kind of how the prints are going to look. They're like pretty tall. I mean, I think this one is the tallest, and it's like 9 feet tall, but the skeleton is still much smaller in the picture than it exists in real life. So as much as I like working in exhibitions, I see my work kind of moving in this direction where I want to work more with printed matter. I think books, publications, zines, they're another really valuable type of presentation for the work. This body of work was called Long-Term Monitoring Plan. And today it exists primarily as this chapbook, which is made on newsprint. I made this work at a residency in Philadelphia, a place called Recycled Artisan Residency that's at a commercial recycling facility. So I printed the book on newsprint to kind of match the ephemeral, disposable quality of the stuff in the pictures. I really like folly architecture. We're looking at pictures from the inside of the book now. I like these monuments to nothing in particular. The residency is not only at a recycling facility, but at a Superfund site. And I was able to spend a month there just like building these temporary sculptures out of large, refuse. This giant root ball was so heavy that it actually dented the side of the dump truck that it rode in on. They had to like push it back together. It was kind of scary. We used a lot of heavy machinery to set this stuff up. So I was like running in and putting 2x4s under this thing, but made a nice sort of wood touching wood monument there. At the center of the book is this fold out poster, which looks like this. And that picture also exists as a 40 by 50 inch pigment print. It's the rare picture that came out exactly how I envisioned it in my mind before I made it, which is really surprising, especially considering we only got one shot at it. Like we dropped this off of a crane and it smashed into the ground and it was over with. And I'm just really happy that it worked out the way that it did. I was committing an OSHA violation at the time that I made this picture. I was sitting on a pallet on the elevated forks of a forklift in order to get to a higher vantage point. I mean, dropping a filing cabinet from a man lift is probably also an OSHA violation when you really get down to it, but that's just occurring to me in this moment right now. At the large 40 by 50 scale, you can actually see the Post-it note on the front of the filing cabinet is flapping in the wind. And here's just a digital rendering of that, but it's kind of the tell for this photograph. It's what like actually shows that this is in motion and not just somehow in stasis. The pictures in Long-Term Monitoring Plan came to me to feel very cinematic, but it wasn't as if they were film stills. It felt more like each one was its own individual still film, like it each contained everything you needed to know about that one particular situation. And the title comes from the title Long-Term Monitoring Plan. It comes from language that I found in a manual online about Superfund site remediation. I wanted to match the kind of fantastical quality of the work with a sort of mundane technical title. So moving from physical publications, I also want to talk about publishing things on the internet. Social media is this like ongoing question for me. I don't exactly know what I want to do with it or how I want to use it, but I turn all the way back to Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, who said in 1936 that there would come the realization that knowledge of photography is just as important as that of the alphabet. Or John Sarkowski writing about William Eggleston in 1976 saying that the best photography of any era is related in iconography and technique to the contemporary standard of vernacular camera work. I guess you could say that I have been thinking about modernism on Instagram, making a variety of these like performative and sculptural works that are platform specific and designed to test the strange boundaries of that medium. Mundanity can be the key to this, but it has to be mundanity with a little bit of a twist. I'm still not yet sure whether I want these posts to be embraced by or rejected by the algorithm, but the pictures are unpredictable and they can sometimes spiral beyond my initial plan. Like these are excerpts from an ongoing performance with a target ball that started as an Instagram joke. And so, like, of course, I started this in 2024, and the physical and digital surfaces of this work have taken on deeper social significance and deeper questions from the time that I started making it. But I'm still kind of finding my way through what that could possibly mean. The rules of the project are simple, although all the target balls that I've ever seen seem to be exactly identical. I may only photograph this one specimen in Knoxville. Additionally, I must only interact with the ball using myself, the surroundings, or objects that I happen to have in my car. I stand by the idea that MTV's Jackass is one of the greatest works of performance art in American history. And I think of this target ball work as sort of like a formalist Jackass without the risk of bodily injury. I've often said that I won't stop until I get the police called on me, but I'm not. I might just also be done with it. I think this is going to be a book. I think I'm working on making a book. I added this for this talk. This is another way that I've used Instagram. This is a short video called "I am being chased by the onion and then Hoffman comes to rescue me." And there is sound, but it's inconsequential. So we'll just watch it. And it actually works better silent because it was just the radio in the background. I guess you can kind of hear it. So I think this is what Instagram is for. That honey bear is named Hoffman. And I wanted to introduce Hoffman because Hoffman has also existed on the other sort of online platform that I use, which is Substack. I'm not going to show you this video, but Hoffman is a hive mind. So it's a collection of honey bears that are all named Hoffman. They're all kind of one guy. And this is a stop motion video that I made of Hoffman initiating more Hoffman into the group. But I post to my Substack every Sunday, which gives me a chance to experiment with formats like stop motion animation that I don't normally work in. It also, it takes on the same sort of banal, absurdist perspective that I use on Instagram. But the fact that I have to post to it every week without fail really has like forced me into some strange corners that I didn't expect. I've been doing these parking lot reviews. This one is for a thrift store in Knoxville. I just photographed the parking lot here. I'll be posting that in April probably. But sometimes I use the platform as a sounding board for some more complex ideas like the ones I've been kind of scratching at tonight. I want to read a short excerpt from one of those now. It's called The Raccoon Thing, and it goes, "I didn't ever mean to make pictures about raccoons, but there's this raccoon thing that's been following me around since grad school. I was photographing one of them in a tree when it clicked for me that the photograph and the animal would have more in common than a passing resemblance. The thing was, neither the raccoon nor the photograph had any use for language, yet they each possessed a uniquely deep understanding of the tree. The photograph sensed the tree as a particular occurrence of light on surfaces, a miracle of technology and science. For the raccoon, it was something more intuitive. I, stupid human, could only Google what kind of tree it was. What good was that? A handy trick I learned in college is to read poetry criticism and sub the word photograph in for poem whenever applicable. It seems to work well. With that in mind, I've been reading a lot of essays by the poet Charles Simic. What words can I trust? How can I know I trust them? Simic asks in Negative Capability and Its Children, then answers. There are a number of replies, but in an age of uncertainties, there has to be a particular kind of answer. It includes, for example, the notion of experiment, which implies a test, a trial, any action or process undertaken to demonstrate something not yet known or, and this is important, to demonstrate something known and forgotten. Experimental means based on experience rather than theory or authority. Empiricism, yes, but with a difference. In experimental poetry, it will have to be an empiricism of imagination and consciousness. So, end quote. Is there any experience quite like a chance encounter with a wild animal? One cannot, through words, stir up the same sensation that occurs when you are walking alone at night with a camera and a tripod, and two raccoons burst out of the bush in front of you. They're tangled in some viciously argumentative ball, but then they feel your presence, stop their snarling, and dart off in opposite directions. Nor can a single photograph provide a play-by-play of that scene's chaos. The picture I have only attempts to describe a moment of the aftermath, when one of the raccoons perched still enough inside a tree to watch the startled photographer make a legible multi-second exposure of it. The leaves are rendered as amber mist in streetlight and wind. But the critter, she's pretty sharp. Though, of course, I don't remember the scene looking like that in real time because it did not. I remember the night, the spots of darkness in the tree, the cars going by, the settling heart rate, the eyes. The photograph is a winky talisman that tries to circumvent you had to be there by aestheticizing a diagonal approximation of what was right in front of me. And that's just a raccoon. It is not too unusual to stumble upon a raccoon. Still, such an encounter transports me briefly out of my human life and into a heartfelt and language-free engagement with the world. Yes, after a millisecond, my literal mind kicks in and resolves the species name of who's looking back at me. Raccoon. But I cherish the perceptible delay at the beginning of that encounter. I have expended a good deal of energy attempting to stay in that initial state through photographs. But believe it or not, I don't go seeking raccoons. They don't show when you do. Simich's framing of something known and forgotten could be applied to any urban wildlife, from an interloping rabbit in a backyard to a rattlesnake nearly stepped upon in tall weeds. Raccoons might have wound up in the spotlight because they also happen to be little comedians. Simich continues, suppose what we call chance is simply a submission to a message from the unconscious. The random then becomes a matter of obedience toward inwardness and calls for appropriate technique. Personally, I recommend a camera that fits in your pocket. So the last pictures I'm going to show you today are some recent ones where this is kind of the first presentation that they're going to get. Like this lecture is their first home. This summer, I returned to Arizona after some years away. I was born in Phoenix, and every time I go back, it becomes even more clear to me that that place was very informative on how I think about photography. Every time I'm back there, it feels like the layers of the place are really important. There's a book called Bird on Fire, and the author describes Phoenix as being a place where home builders move to build homes for home builders to move into, for home builders to move into, and so on and so on and so on. He says it's a city that shouldn't exist. But what I want to pay attention to here is that there's an elf taped into the car window in the foreground. I somehow always find myself photographing sprites, elves, little green guys. They bear some resemblance to animals, and even though they live entirely within the realm of fantasy, they still end up with a visible presence in the work. It was around the time that I photographed all these Grinches here that I thought maybe I should stop photographing other people's copyrighted green guys and get myself my own proprietary green guy. So I did. I like him. He's free of external connotations and so quite versatile. Like, for instance, I think these two photographs worked well together. It's something about chaos and sitting. This one's called Chicken Plank. She is examining her predicament. This is actually my favorite photo that I've made recently. I think sometimes it's important to just drop something that's, incredibly simple, kind of straightforward. I lived in New York City for a while, like 3 years, and the thing that I missed most while I was there was parking lots. Parking lots are a really essential part of my work because they go a long way in my mind to explaining the world that we live in. Last year, I was in a parking lot when I saw a bizarre-looking cat slink diagonally through the space and disappear behind a fence. I tried to take its photo, but my camera battery was dead, so I rushed back to my studio and tried to cobble together a wooden replica of that cat as quickly as I possibly could. It was a complete failure. But the rapid, urgent cats had some appeal. Like I enjoyed trying to recreate that cat that I wasn't able to photograph. So I kept going. I think I'm at about 12 of these memory cats now, with these 3 being some of the most exciting thus far, the most promising. I couldn't decide which photograph to end this on. So I'm going to show you 2 more. One is of an endearingly imperfect snowman, and the other is of a shockingly perfect pineapple. However you cut photography, it always comes down to this like refutation of binaries for me. It's science and art, so on and so on. There's so many ways to look at it. It's 2D, 3D, on and on and on. But so we'll look at these 2 pictures, which I feel like are very different, but maybe a good last few photographs to show you. Okay, so at this point, when I did this lecture for professional reasons, I then transitioned into talking about my practice as an educator. But that doesn't feel entirely relevant today. So instead, I'd like to take these last few minutes here to educate you about something very specific. You see, I have become evangelical about oatmeal. I eat it every day. I talk about it too. Pretty much every conversation that I have eventually comes around to oatmeal. And I talk to a lot of people. My position is simple. Eat oatmeal. This is not a paid endorsement. I have no oat sponsor. I have no oat brand of preference. It does not matter to me which oatmeal people eat. I simply think most folks would be happy with a nice, warm bowl of the stuff in front of them. This morning, I had Bob's Red Mill. But I would not turn down any of Bob's competitors. There is Quaker. There is relative newcomer Kodiak. There are plenty of store brands that come in cylinders. I had some of those last summer from H-E-B in Texas and Big Y in Massachusetts. It is possible to save a lot of money by going with one of the store brands. It is still oatmeal, and the important thing is to eat oatmeal. Important is the wrong word to use here, but I cannot think of the right one. Porridge, gruel, cream of wheat. These foods may all be similar, but to me, there is no substitute for oatmeal, except perhaps in the case of gruel. I'm not quite sure what gruel is, and it is possible that gruel is just another word for oatmeal. But I would not trust this to be true if I saw gruel on the menu of a restaurant. I would have to ask the waiter. I'd learn something that way. However, this scenario is unlikely to unfold because I don't go out much. Not for breakfast. It is simply too easy to prepare oatmeal at home. You can make it in a variety of ways. Overnight oats have become popular, but I have difficulty thinking of making breakfast in the evening. I have tried microwaving oatmeal, and that is probably the way that I would do it if I was late for work. I did not buy a microwave. I found one in my basement. My favorite way to prepare oats is on the stove. I use the same pot every day, and I wash it afterwards. If you ask me, stove-cooked oatmeal is a classic. Now, I'm no traditionalist. Far from it. I simply think stove-cooked oats taste nice, and I like to stir them with a wooden spoon as the water slowly evaporates. Some oats that I have seen are steel cut. I'm not exactly sure what that means or how those oats differ in nutritional value than the others that are available to me at the supermarket. But I will eat any oats that are presented to me. I would make instant oatmeal if I was staying at a motel that had continental breakfast. Instant oatmeal is often the best option for a contemporary continental breakfast, but that should come as no surprise since oatmeal is often the best option for any breakfast. It works with almost every topping. Blackberries, blueberries, salt, almonds, peanut butter, honey, maple syrup, blanched almond slivers. Someone on a budget could try a banana, or maybe just some cinnamon. Figs would be fancy. You could serve oatmeal with figs in your finest bowl. Have a friend over for breakfast, serve them some figgy oatmeal in your finest bowl, and they will smile. Lately, I have been asking my friends the following question. in a situation where money was no object, what would your preferred oatmeal topping be? This question tends to catch people off guard because typically when I ask it, I have not been talking about oatmeal for as long as I have now. Typically, these sorts of hypotheticals have to do with travel or dream homes. My answer is probably almond butter. Now I am daydreaming about the next time that I get to eat oatmeal. I hope some other people are as well. It may be sooner than they realize. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Oh, there's that.
Thank you, Bucky.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions that weren't already answered in that last?
I feel like that should have explained most of it, honestly.
I only had a question about oatmeal.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I mean, there's more I could say. No, I'm good. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, maybe after the oatmeal thing, it's hard to remember the other stuff to ask questions about, but. It was a diversion to avoid questions. That's true. Yeah, when I did this lecture for a job interview last week, the questions were kind of scary. So, no. What? But okay. So, yeah, maybe I do have a question. What are your fantasy oatmeal toppings? What do you all prefer? Oh, that's a good. I like that a lot, actually. Yeah, pecans with a little maple syrup is delicious. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, I haven't done that. Yeah. I've got this whole other thing going on in my head about the color orange right now, but it's not worth getting into at this moment. Yeah, I really appreciate y'all's attention. That was a nice time. Thank you. I'm gonna wander over there, but if anyone wants to chat, I'm around. Thank you. I do not, unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah, on Sunday at the Mothership in Woodstock. And Sam and I are actually going to try to get a zine together for that maybe tomorrow. So there might be a new little publication there that might be exclusive to that event, at least for now. So if you're around, come say hello. It's a funny gallery that's in a house. Oh, pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you all. That was really lovely.